You're listening to Sportsnet Today on the Sportsnet Radio Network.
Sportsnet Today on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Roger Lajoie with you until noon. Show Ali and Jesse Rubinov have Jays pregame coverage coming up just after noon. First pitch, 1:37 today from the Rogers Center as the Blue Jays try to avoid a series sweep against the Dodgers and that scary top of the line. Well, the whole lineup's scary, but especially the top of it. We'll talk a little NBA coming up later in this hour. Lakers keep the series alive, and other news, Celtics are getting a pushback from the Heat, but have they taken command of that series? We'll do a little NBA for you. Back to the text line, 590-590. I will read them. 590-590. Keep them coming. Name and location. And on X at the Raj590 as well. And we'll do more Jays talk. And Jim Lang going to join us. One of my favorites. Has written a terrific book about the Stanley Cup. Stanley Cup. Imagine people get the Stanley Cup. They get a day with the Stanley Cup. How does that work? Wonder. Well, he wrote a book about it. And here's the thing. That's not that old a process. They haven't done that forever, right? And Jim will tell us when they really started that. Hey, every guy gets a day with the Stanley Cup. But it's only a couple of decades old. So nobody wearing a Leaf jersey has ever had that. So there won't be much Leaf content in that. But I'll ask Langer what he thinks about the Maple Leafs. I am going to ask David Morassutti right now, Sportsnet editor and host of Locked On Leafs, about the Maple Leafs as we continue talking about last night's game. David, good morning. Your thoughts on the first two periods in particular last night that have Leaf Nation in a frenzy here and have the star players on this team mouthing off at each other on the bench. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, as much as Sheldon Keefe wants to say there wasn't frustration, I think it was kind of apparent when you see the body language of your star players and the crowd, just how that period, I think the crowd pretty much summed up how they felt about that effort and how the Leafs played just wasn't good enough, frankly.
Wasn't good enough indeed. Sheldon Keefe defended the effort, but let's put that aside, David. The difference in this series, going in, we knew that Boston had better goaltending and a better defensive core. That was a given. That was obvious. The Leafs' strength, though, was they score a lot more goals than the Bruins, and with all that firepower, that might neutralize it a bit. Yet it's the Bruins, their firepower, their top players, and in particular, David, their special teams that have been the difference. That's got to be frustrating as well for the Maple Leafs when you consider the quality of their top forwards, and Boston's winning the power play battle.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a carryover from what we saw in the regular season. Like when the Leafs played the Bruins, Boston's penalty kill stymied the Leafs power play, and the Leafs penalty kill wasn't good enough against the Bruins power play. And as you said, it's the Bruins' top players that are leading the charge. You talk about the goalies, Ned Swayman's doing his best to make sure the Leafs power play isn't getting good. Their chances aren't going in. And the Bruins' defenses and their star players are making sure the Leafs aren't getting chances in on Swayman when they are shooting it. So, yeah, it's frustrating because you think that in the playoffs the Leafs would try to change some of that identity of them not being able to get through to Boston on the special teams battle, but that certainly is carried over. And then when you look at the Bruins defense, yeah, they're continuing this ugly trend for the Leafs. I mean, they've gone 6 straight games without winning on home ice, and then you look at 10 of the last 11 games where they scored 2 or less goals. You're not winning many playoff games or just any games in general with that type of offensive output.
Yes, the continuing lack of not getting even 3 goals in a game by the Maple Leafs is incredible. It was just that game against Boston that they won, and all those 2s you see against them in the playoffs are pretty phenomenal, no doubt about it. So, David, Samsonov gets pulled after 40 minutes. Joseph Woll comes in. Do you think there's a chance he starts the next game? And is Keefe going to do more juggling of the lineup? Took a little bit of heat for putting Dewar out and putting Robertson in. But is this just shuffling the deck a little bit? Does it matter that much? What do you think about Game 5 now that it's sudden death?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start the lineup first. I think when you look at, with William Nylander coming in, everyone kind of thought that Nick Robertson would be the odd man coming out. But as Keith said, he wanted to keep some more players with offensive upside in this lineup. And, it's hard not to question that thinking considering how this offense has performed. Unfortunately, Connor Dewar has been kind of one of the better, players when it comes to the PK, defensive play. And that fourth line was the most consistent line, throughout the series. And, yeah, obviously it looks bad when, Ryan Reeves gives up the puck and it ends up in the back of the net. I think when you look at what this team needs to do for Game 5, yeah, I think, when you're a team that hasn't been able to get the puck in the net, changes are likely to come. And you saw in that third period, obviously, with Austin Matthews not able to continue, they did the line juggling, and it seemed to spark something. So it wouldn't surprise me if Sheldon Keefe tries to move things around, because that's kind of one of the few things the coach can actually do, because, there's not anybody out of the lineup that can come in and provide an offensive punch for this team. And then when you look at the goaltending, I think when and I've heard a lot about, Ilya Samsonov hasn't lost in the game, and, Jerry Swim has been so good, it's tough to really compete against that. But to me, what I think has been the issue for Samsonov is those timely goals, not getting that save when the team just really needs their goaltender to make that extra save, the hard save. And with Joseph Woll, I think there's a little more calmness to him in the net, and I'm wondering if that's something the Leafs think about for Game 5, is just having a little more of that calming presence in the net, and maybe that gets the team in a different mindset to how they play. Maybe the Leafs are, I'm not saying the Leafs aren't satisfied with how Samsonov's playing. I'm just wondering if they need to just change that one part to maybe give this team a better mindset going into Game 5.
Well, we'll see. And, yeah, goaltending changes sometimes are made just for the sake of change. And I do agree, David, like you can't blame – there's a difference between you can't blame the goalie and the goaltender is stealing games. And Samsonov is not stealing games, but you can't blame him. He's been good. He's been good. There's no issue there. But sometimes that's why you have the two goaltenders. And, look, Boston even did that in the second game of the series. Now they've got two all-world goaltenders, they think, and they're right, by the way. So it is a little difference, but among the decisions you can make. But, man, all bets got to be off. You got to try everything as they go into Boston. David, we're focused on the Leafs as we should be here. And Terry Koshin joined us earlier, and I mentioned this, and your thoughts on it. There are two teams on the ice. The other team's trying to win, too. The other team's the Boston Bruins. They're not the big, bad, scary Bruins anymore, and you just wonder if the only hope, maybe it's not the only hope, but a hope the Maple Leafs have to get back into this series is recent history. Because last year, the Florida Panthers were down 3-1 going to Boston for Game 4 of the series, Game 5 of the series, and we all know what happened at the end of the series. So, I mean, if the Leafs can make it more difficult, get a lead, maybe the Bruins start getting a little heebie-jeebies. I know they got a lot of veterans on that team, but it was only last year that they squandered a similar lead, David.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and I'm sure Jim Montgomery is going to be putting that into the Bruins' mind of, let's not get too complacent. We know what happened last year. But I think if you're the Leafs, it's when you look at what the Bruins have done the last couple of games, look at the players that have stepped up for this team. It's the captain, Brad Marchand, and it's David Pastrnak. I thought the Leafs had done a very good job limiting Pastrnak in the last few games, but, two of the last three games, he scored a goal and scored a big goal in crucial times. And I think that's going to be the area I think the Leafs are going to have to focus on is how do we limit the star players of the Bruins, like a Marchand, like a Pastrnak, and force somebody else to beat you in this game. And, that's, I think you got to give a lot of credit to the Bruins. The leadership has really stepped up. On the back end, McAvoy and Lindholm have taken a big part of, stopping the Leafs attack here. And I think if you're the Bruins, that's what gives you the most hope is that Marchand and Pastrnak have really taken this team on their back and, have carried the mantle. You think about all the changes the Bruins have been through, Bergeron's gone, Krejci's gone, and everyone wondered if this was going to be where the Bruins would finally start to, fall off a little bit here. And they haven't because Pasternak and Marchand have led the way. Unfortunately, I think that's where this series has really been, to this point, the Leafs have lost this series because they haven't been able to match the star caliber that the Bruins have been bringing to this point.
So finally, before we let you go, David, what needs to happen then in Game 5 for this to turn around? We talk about the lineup, and whether it's Robertson, whether it's Dewar, whether it's TJ Brody, whether who's coming in and out of the lineup is of some significance, I suppose. But we go back again. You've nailed it. Pasternak and Marchand have been so much better than the Leafs' top players. And I know Nylander didn't play the first 3 games. I know Matthews is battling something. But end of the day, you add that discrepancy to the goaltending and team defense advantage the Bruins already had, it makes it impossible. But these guys have just got to score, right?
They do. It's pretty much simple as that. If you're the Leafs, and if you want to point to one thing they need to do better, their top players have to come out and be the offensive catalyst. And it hasn't happened to this point. And, I'm sure there's a lot of people wondering, do you have to switch up the lines? You can switch up the lines as much as you want, but if your top guys you're moving around aren't able to create separation for themselves, like you look at the goal Mitch Marner scored last night. He found a way to get himself some open ice, made a nice move that put the goaltender out of position, and it went into the net. The Leafs just haven't been able to get that separation from Boston, and that I think is going to be crucial for going into Game 5. They really need to find a way to get separation, especially on the power play. Like if they go into Game 5 against Boston and they don't score a power play goal, I don't know if they're going to have enough 5-on-5 to get themselves over the hump. They really need to find a way to get that power play going. It's been a constant thorn in their side, and I think in their heads too. I think they're a little bit in their heads when it comes to the power play. They just got to find a way to get some separation from this Bruins defense.
I'll see if they can do it in Game 5. Definitely did not do it last night outside of a stretch in the third period, and as a result, they trail in the series 3-1. David Morassutti joining us, host of Locked On Leafs, Sportsnet editor as well. David, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Roger.
That's David Morassutti joining us from Sportsnet.